And here I was thinking that I was going to make a video talking about JT Miller and Ryan Kessler, and I would give Canucks fans what they wanted, but this idea popped up instead on the 32 Thoughts podcast via Elliotte Friedman, and I was like, okay, well, it kind of sucks since I already said in the previous video that we're going to make this JT Miller video, but that will be pushed forward to tomorrow, and this video instead is going to be about the Montreal Canadiens. It's just kind of fortunate that both these teams don't play today, so we can make this video at 3 p.m. PST and actually have no qualms about it. So, going over Shea Weber. This was actually a discussion that was brought up yesterday on an article on Sportsnet. No, actually it wasn't an article, it was a bit on the Hockey Night in Canada 32 Thoughts, I believe. This was said on the TV, and there was an article written about it afterwards. Yes, here you go. So, this is what Elliotte Friedman said on Hockey Night in Canada on Saturday. There's a lot of talk of the Montreal Canadiens, and whether or not Shea Weber could be available. Weber, of course, is not going to play in the NHL ever again, or he's likely not to, knock on wood. He's got 4 years left after this year at $7.9 million a season, but the cash is $6 million total. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are some teams who need either long-term injury room or who want to get to the cap floor and aren't looking to spend a ton in the next couple of years, who take a look at Shea Weber and that contract. It is a possible move. Now, this video, I don't really want to go out there and just talk about Weber as a player, because we all kind of know what Shea Weber was about. He was a big guy, right-handed guy, a shooting guy, a body-checking guy, just a solid presence on the Canadiens' blue line, and one of the better leaders that we have seen in the National Hockey League the past few years. He was a captain on both teams he was on for a reason. He played last year, had 19 points in 48 games and 6 points in 22 games in the finals, but he hasn't played a game this year, and he likely will never play ever again. That $7.8 million cap hit, though, is pretty juicy, and it allows the Montreal Canadiens to go over the cap by that amount of money because of how the LTIR works. Should there be a team that goes out there and says, okay, crap, we don't have enough money to sign our guys, or we have too many good players that it puts us over the cap, what the heck are we going to do now? Trading for Shea Weber allows you to go over the cap, and it's a pretty cut-and-paste strategy that a lot of NHL teams have been using. The LTIR method is not a new one, but Weber all of a sudden is in a position where, I mean, it's brought up by Friedman that there are some teams that might go out there and maybe think about it, and that's not even strictly bound to the idea of going over the cap with LTIR space. This is also applying to teams that don't have enough money spent. Teams like Arizona, for example, where this team, if you take away all the guys they acquired in the offseason, etc., there just wasn't enough money going around. So what did the Arizona Coyotes do? They traded for Louis Eriksson, they traded for Beagle, they traded for Roussel, they traded for Gostisbehere, they traded for Andrew Ladd, they traded for all these guys that are expensive, and that allows them to be over the salary cap minimum, which allows them to be a regular NHL team. Now, this is what Friedman said on the 32 Thoughts. I gotta get used to saying that. It's been 32 teams for almost a year now. How did I not say 32? 32 Thoughts. This is what he said earlier today about the Minnesota Wild and Shea Weber's contract. If there was any team where it would make sense to use Weber's contract, it might be them. Because you take yourself right to the edge, and you give yourself an extra $7.6 million in cap room by putting Weber on the LTIR. Let's go over onto the Minnesota Wild and their cap-friendly page and take a look at what they're going to have to deal with as the next few years roll around. Now, this offseason, they have themselves Kevin Fiala, who they're going to re-sign, and that's going to be a pretty difficult conversation to have. Everybody's kind of talking about, okay, Kevin Fiala, does he stay, does he go, this and that. It's going to be pretty interesting to see where that goes down. And then the year after that, you also have Matt Boldy that you're going to have to re-sign too. And I pity anybody who has to go out there and try to make those conversations work out properly, because trying to keep together this core with a team that has only $2 million in cap space right now, it's not going to be easy. You also have Kaapo Kähkönen, who is expiring, and he's supposed to be one of your goaltenders that helps you out in the long-term future, so there's another conversation to have too. The Minnesota Wild could use some salary cap relief, and especially when you start thinking about all the guys that they have that are going to be making a lot of money. Brodin making $6 million, Spurgeon 7.5, of course Kaprizov making 9, and then Zuccarello making 6. This is a pretty beefy team, and if you take a look at their projected cap space for the next few years, okay, in 2022, 2023, they're going to have $9 million to re-sign Kevin Fiala, which is the big one, Connor Duer's over there, Nick Bjugstad, Nico Sturm, Alex Goligoski, Jordy Ben. Okay, Jordy Ben's not going to cost a lot. And then Capo Kakinen and Victor Rask as well. Take the amount of cap space you remain after you get those conversations done, and you have yourselves about $23 million the year after when a whole bunch of other RFAs come off the books, with Matthew Boldy being the big one. So for Minnesota, there could be some flexibility that you can add if you were to say, okay, Shea Weber could be our guy, add him onto the squad, and it'll give us an extra $7-ish million that we can go over the cap by, assuming we fill our team out at the cap anyway. This could be a classic Pavel Datsyuk to Arizona kind of deal, a Brent Seabrook to Tampa Bay kind of deal. These happen quite frequently, and the Arizona Coyotes and Tampa Bay Lightning just happen to be on the receiving end of those conversations in the past. And so, wrapping up this conversation here, when you think about the Minnesota Wild and Shea Weber, one of the other things you have to consider is what exactly a trade would look like. Now, that's one of the parts of this conversation that Elliotte Friedman, I would say by design, specifically did not talk about on TV or on the podcast. But I want to turn the floor over to you. If you're the Montreal Canadiens, you're GM Kent Hughes, and you're going to go out there and trade Shea Weber to a team that needs the cap space, what does that demand on the open market? I mean, if we go over to previous trades, let's look up on Google right here, Brent Seabrook trade to the Tampa Bay Lightning, and take a look at what that guy cost the Bolts. Okay, Tyler Johnson and a 2023 second. Okay, that's not bad, to be honest. You go back over to Pavel Datsyuk, and that was a first-round pick, and a few other things as well. That was kind of circumstantial because the Red Wings really needed to get rid of that Datsyuk contract. But with this Brent Seabrook thing being done just a year ago, this was July 2021, it kind of makes sense to me if you start saying that Shea Weber could demand, let's say, a second-round pick and maybe another roster player. Now, it would have to be a guy that the Minnesota Wild would be comfortable in giving up, but those probably do exist, especially if you're getting some pretty good salary cap relief in the process. So, I don't know if it's one of these guys near the bottom of their lineup. Their cheaper guys include Bjugstad and Connor Duer and Brendan Duhaime. There are some guys over here like Jordy Ben that I think could be really interesting. John Merrill is also on the Wild as well, if you want to go full pandemonium and bring those two, or one of those two, back to Montreal. Actually, Jordy Ben would be a pretty interesting one. I did say this previously because he was a Canuck after he was a Hab, but he was a lot better as a Hab than he was as a Vancouver Canuck. Admittedly, I haven't really been watching too many Minnesota games this year, so I don't really have the scoop on Jordy, but either way, if you're a Minnesota Wild fan, let me know in the comments all your thoughts about the idea of trading for a Shea Weber. Is this the kind of guy that you would be interested in to help you out in your cap situation in the next few years? Weber is going to be paid for a while. He's expiring in 2026, so that $7 million LTIR space you're going to be able to get could be seen as a lot more valuable 2-3 years from now than it is today. This is just one of those, okay, do you really want to go out there and start planning for the long-term kind of moves? Because Shea Weber obviously is one of those guys that can help you out in that respect. What is it that you'd be willing to give up for this kind of player? Tyler Johnson and a second-round pick was the return for Brent Seabrook, so do you see something sort of in a similar vein? I mean, Seabrook and Weber are both defensemen that are making a significant amount of money that are being acquired by teams looking to do well in the playoffs. So I would say they're probably comparable, right? Habs fans, let me know in the comments, what is it from Minnesota that you would like to see? Do you want to go the roster player route, or do you want to just say, screw it, no Tyler Johnson in a second? How about a second and Adam Beckman? How about a second and another prospect? Just any guy that you feel could fit in this sort of situation that Kent Hughes and co. could potentially value. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Trolls 99. And bye.